Well, let's do something new. Welcome to How to TIG Weld, sorta. What's up, guys? Welcome to the very first episode of How to TIG Weld, sorta. So one of the top 10 questions I get all the time is about TIG welding, and I'm kind of torn on the subject because I feel like I can get the job done, but I'm not an expert. And so I don't feel like I need to be giving advice as an expert TIG welder. So what I'm gonna do is create a series on TIG welding, not from an expert, but from me, a regular guy in his garage, kind of just like you. So the idea behind this series is not so much that I'm gonna give you expert advice on TIG welding. You know, I probably have a little bit of knowledge that a lot of you guys would like to have, but it's not expert advice. It's just get in the game kind of advice. Get to TIG welding kind of advice. So the idea is in every episode, I want to do one of these a week. In every episode, I'm going to dive into one little thing that has to do with TIG welding. Maybe even just welding in general. One week it might be sharpening tungsten. The next week it might be the difference between gas lens diffusers and a regular collet style diffuser, or welding helmets and welding helmet features, TIG welder settings, TIG welder features that you may not know about, different TIG welders, torches, the difference between a foot pedal and a trigger, finger trigger, the advantages from foot pedal to finger trigger. So anyway, you get the idea. I don't really know what I want to call this series. May just stick with How to TIG Weld, sorta, episode 1. The very first episode, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna start at the very basic ground level on this thing, and I'm going to feature my Everlast 325 EXT welder, TIG welder. I'm just gonna briefly go over it, kind of show you what I'm using currently in the shop and some of the features that it has. All right, so this is my newest machine, the Everlast 325 EXT. This thing is a beast. I've done some stuff in the past with my Eastwood TIG 200, digital TIG 200. I still have it, still like that machine, works great, haven't had any issues. This machine here, to me, is a step up from that. For one, obviously it'll do 325 amps versus the 200 that the Eastwood would do, and this one is water cooled as well. Now I guess you could water cool that with this actual water cooler if you wanted to. This one is just made to match. So with the water cooled torch, basically you got the hot water going back into the cooler, the cold water coming out. It runs into the machine right here, through the torch, out to the end, circulates through the end, and back through all the way back to here and recirculates. It's got a fan on it, cools the water off for you, keeps the torch nice and cool, and is a great feature if you're doing long runs of high amperage welding. I opted for the 25-foot torch, got it curled up right here. I actually love this because I don't have to move the welder or the table. It'll kind of reach anywhere I need it to. Once I move into the bigger shop, I'll just move my table wherever I'm working, and the torch will be able to reach whatever I'm doing, as long as I can ground it, of course. I've got this one outfitted with a Furic cup. This is the FUPA 12. Love these things. I will go over those in a future video and why they're so awesome. On this machine, I have the option of a trigger, finger trigger, or pedal. They both are amazing to use in their own way. So the finger trigger is awesome when you need to tack something in a tight space inside the car. You don't want a pedal in there. You don't need a pedal in there. You just ground it. You set your amperage where you want it. If you're just tacking, usually it's like a high amperage, 200 amps. Click it one time, it'll fuse weld that tube, pipe, whatever it is that you're welding, and you're ready to go. You move on to the next thing. You can also figure out exactly what amperage you need to weld a specific thing. So for instance, a lot of the tubing in the Bibster build, I can weld it at about 75 to 80 amps. I can set that here, I can climb around in that car, I can weld what I need to and not need a pedal. Now let's talk about the welder itself. I'm just gonna briefly buzz over all these features. I'm gonna come back in later episodes and we're gonna zero in on each feature specifically for that episode. So you'll get a full rundown on this thing as we move through this series. For right now though, I'm just gonna kind of run through them really fast. And this is not all of the features. I'm just gonna hit the main features. All right, so the very first thing on this is it has a clear lid so you can kind of see what's going on, but it keeps a lot of the dust and gookiness off the face of the welder itself. First box, we got your memory settings. This has 8 different programmable, I think 8, maybe 10, 9 programmable settings. For instance, I was just talking about how you can weld with the trigger setting inside the car. So I have that set as one setting. Basically, I can just scroll through these. I can find my trigger, finger trigger setup at 75 amps. Everything's already set. I can roll through it. It's already set at 75 amps. It's ready to go. I've also got a setting for tacking things. Got it set at 200 amps, trigger, finger trigger, and I can just scroll through that when I tack something, find it, I'm ready to go. And then I've got several pedal settings, some just regular, 100 amp max or 200 amp max. I've got one that actually is a 200 amp max, or I think it's 200 amp max with a pulse setting on it. So anyway, you can basically pre-configure whatever you want to on these welders. You figure out what works for what you're doing, and then once you figure it out, you can basically press and save this as one of your settings. This display here shows your amperage. This over here is your AC or DC setting. So you got your standard DC setting for mild steel, stainless steel, and then you have your aluminum settings, your AC here, and it has several different waveforms that you can choose from. Just below that, you have 2T and 4T, and then the pedal option. So your 2T basically is if you hit the trigger on the torch, it goes up to an amperage, keeps it that amperage as long as you hold it, and then when you release that trigger, the amperage goes away. The 4T basically, when you press the trigger, it goes up to a certain amperage. When you let go of it, it goes to another amperage. So for instance, you could press the trigger, it could go to 50 amps. When you let go of that trigger, it could go then to 150 amps. And then when you want that thing to come back down to 50 amps, you press the trigger again, and once you release it, it will nose off of that. And then the pedal obviously is pretty self-explanatory. Just below that, you can choose TIG pulse settings. So you can have it off, you can have a standard AC/DC, or an advanced AC. This next display here is basically showing you what you're adjusting within these cycles. So for instance, on the 2T setting with the finger trigger, when you mash that button, you can actually adjust how long it takes to get up to maximum amperage. You can adjust what that maximum amperage is, and then you can adjust how long it takes to slope off that maximum amperage once you let go of that finger trigger. And so these just basically tell you where you're at in here to adjust those. You can also adjust the pulse width and percentage. That's kind of what this is showing you here. And then pulse frequency. Over here you got AC balance, which is how much you're cleaning or not cleaning when you're welding aluminum, and AC frequency. So I'll show you in a second. We'll turn this thing on. It's a little noisy, so that's why I have it off. But you'll see that these lights light up. Each one of these dots lights up, and you can actually scroll through these, and when it's lit, whatever you see here is what that setting is. Then down here at the bottom, you have the choice of high frequency TIG or lift TIG, meaning that this one here, you can just hold the tungsten close to whatever you're gonna weld, and it will do a high frequency start. This one will actually start once you can actually touch the tungsten to what you're welding. As soon as you lift off, it will start the arc. So there's the machine running. You can hear the fans. The fans do run all the time. That is one difference probably you see from other welders. Doesn't really bother me much. I like the fact that it's trying to keep that machine as cool as it possibly can. It's not a bad thing in my mind. So here's the settings I was talking about. So we start at 1. This is my first setting, 200 amps. It is on the pedal. And so as I mash the pedal, it'll go up and down based on how much of that 200 amps I need. High frequency TIG, which is what basically I do on everything. And that's it. No frills on that one. The next one, setting 2, 200 amps. The only difference between this one and the pedal one is that this is on the 2T finger trigger. This is what I use to tack stuff. If I'm in the car, I don't want to have to use the pedal. I'll just grind that thing, crawl in the little nook or cranny that I need to crawl in, and I can tack that in about half a second. Alright, setting 3, there's my 76 amps on the 2T finger trigger. This is what I use to weld any of the chassis tubing within the car. That is very close to the optimum amperage to weld that stuff, and so that's what I have it set as. I don't need the pedal. I can crawl into any space I need to, use one hand for filler rod, the other hand for the torch, and just activate it right there on the 2T finger trigger. Setting 4 is just the pedal at 100 amps. This is just a little bit more control. At full pedal, I'm only using 100 amps, which gives me a lot more control between 0 and 100. And so on and so forth. You kind of see how this works. And it is 9 settings. Give you a quick side-by-side of the welder and the water cooler itself. So the water cooler has an on and off switch right here that I just leave on because this cooler is actually powered off the welder itself. So when I click on the welder, as long as this switch is on, the water cooler would kick on. When I was telling you that I had a 25-foot torch, this is what I was talking about. I just got it all curled up right here. And so I have plenty of reach on this thing. And these come with a really nice cover that you can unzip and replace or wash, and then just zip it back up. So there you go. Episode number 1 of How to TIG Weld, sorta. Wanted to bring you the very first episode showing off my Everlast TIG machine. Everlast makes an assortment of TIG welding machines and MIG welding machines and plasma machines, actually, plasma cutters as well. Everything from beginner to what you see right here. All the Everlast machines I feel like are at a very good price point. I have a link in the description where you can go check those out. It's just the tools I use. If you go in there at the very bottom, you see all the machines that I recommend, starting from, you know, the basic up to this machine here. You can go check those out. See what Everlast has to offer. Alright guys, there you go. How to TIG weld, sorta. Let me know what you want to see, what you have questions about, some of the things I can cover. Maybe it'll help you guys out. If I don't know it, I'll go do a little research before I show it to you. Still not gonna be professional, but might help. I don't know. Hell, maybe I'll even have some professionals on this series. That would be cool. As always, thank you for joining me. I will see you guys some more this week. Y'all go do work, son.